everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kat, and for today, this is actually a subscriber request that I do some swatch comparisons between a few different palettes. So we're going to be looking at 3 different palettes. I only have 2 hands though, so 1 second. First one up is going to be the Collidos Club Nebula, which is the collab between Collidos and Angie Nyquist. Then we have the Glaminatrix palette, that's the new one, the You Beauty palette, and then we also have the Odin's Eye NORN's palette. So we are going to be doing all kinds of comparison swatches, and so what I thought I would do first is do the swatches of all of the shades that are similar to each other, where you could potentially sort of view them as dupes. I don't know if I've been able to find like where any of them are 100% the same shade, but there are some similar ones, and then we'll swatch the rest of them that are all unique shades so you can see how many unique ones there are in each palette along with what's the same. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. We're going to be using all of my blank slate of my arms, and we're just going to jump right in. And so I'm going to swatch, then I'll come in close so you guys can see each of them super duper up close, and we're just going to talk through everything. But I'm really excited to do this. Also, fun fact, Glaminatrix just had their other pre-sale for the You Beauty palette. It did sell out, but again, this is going to be in their permanent line, so fear not, you can get it again. Then the Club Nebula palette, this is limited edition. They are actually coming out with one more sale of this palette. If you are wanting to get it, I would highly recommend that you jump on that one. I believe it's on the 14th of April. I think it's 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then the NORN's palette is permanent line, still available. Go grab it. She's a beautiful girl. Okay, now that that's done, let's just get into the swatches. All right, this is the You Beauty palette, so we can see what that color story looks like. Then we have the Club Nebula palette, and then we have the NORN's palette. And you can see that all 3 of them do have a good range of lighter to deep shades, as well as a good smattering of mattes to shimmers. And so I think that's part of why we're wanting to do some of these comparisons, is that they are all similar in how the color stories are built out, that you have lights and deeps and mattes and shimmers that are all in the same range. Okay, so the first one up that I'm going to do is going to be Old Mate from the Glaminatrix palette. That is this guy. And then we have the Green Chameleon, which is this guy. Green Chameleon. There we go. And Old Mate. There you go. So you can see they are a little bit different. The Green Chameleon has more of a green tone, whereas the Old Mate shade has more of a yellowish undertone. Old Mate is a bit of a duochrome where it shifts from that kind of yellowy green to brown, whereas Green Chameleon just kind of stays more with that greenish olivey shift on there. All right, next up from the Collidos palette, we have You're My Only Hope, which is kind of a purpley shimmer, and that one is similar to the Chockers shade from Glaminatrix. So You're My Only Hope is up first. And there's that guy. And then Chockers is right there. And you can see these 2 are definitely more similar, but I would say that Chockers has just a smidge more of a purple lilac-y undertone, whereas You're My Only Hope is more of like a purplish with a bit of more of a silvery blue base to it. Then we have 3 shades that are a little bit I am not sure how similar they are, but they are just enough to where I'm like, let's just go ahead and see what happens. So from Collidos, we have the Celestial shade, which is this guy down here. Then from the Glaminatrix palette, we have the G'day shade. And then from the Odin's Eye, we have the Amber Palace shade. And I have a feeling that even though they do kind of look moderately similar in the palette, that they are going to be very different after I swatch them. So first up is Celestial from Collidos. There's that guy. Then we have the G'day shade from Glaminatrix. Yeah, they're already different. Okay, cool. Then we've got Amber Palace from Odin's Eye. All right, that is super duper light. Let me get a little bit more built up on there, but that is a topper for sure. All right, so here are our three shades. You can see that the Kaleido shade is definitely a pinkish. This guy is our deeper multi-chrome, and then I would say the Amber Palace is like the topper version of Good Day, honestly, because it does have a bit of a shift to it, but it's just so sheer that you can barely make it out. But I do think that that one is a little bit more similar to the Good Day shade, but Celestial for sure is its own thing. Okay, next up, we have three different shades where two of them I am fairly certain are going to be super duper similar, and that is those lighter multi-chrome shades. We have one from Odin's Eye and one from Glaminatrix that are super duper similar, and then the Kaleidos shade that we're gonna look at is Nova, which is this guy right here. And in the pan, it is definitely that whitish kind of shift to it for a shimmer. But as I look at it, I see purplish blue. And so I think that's already different than the Flamin' Gala shade that we have from Glaminatrix, which is more of a multi-chrome that has yellow to orange to pink shift rather than a purplish blue. And then the Pink Chameleon shade in Odin's Eye, and that one has a very similar shift to the Glaminatrix. So super interesting to see what's gonna happen with those. But we'll start off with the Kaleidos shade first. So it's gonna be Nova. Yeah, you can definitely see kind of that bluish to purple, maybe a smidge of a green, ever so slight, but I think it's primarily purple to blue shift. Then we have Flaming Gala. Yeah, you can already see this is more of that pinkish to orange shift, and this is like your blue, purple, green shift. And then we have Pink Chameleon. Yeah. So as I come in close, you can definitely see where these two are more similar. Not 100% identical, but definitely that sheer pink, orange, yellowish shift with ever so slight of green. This guy's definitely a purple to blue shift. So I would definitely say that Nova is unique to the Collidos palette, whereas Pink Chameleon and Flaming Gala are a little bit more similar, but of the two, I don't think the formula is 100% identical. I do think that out of the two, the stronger pigment would be in the Glaminatrix one, just because the Odin's Eye one did come out slightly more sheer, but that shift is super similar to each other. Next up, we're gonna get into a little bit of the matte shades for this, because I think there are three matte shades that are fairly similar to each other, and that's from Collidos, we have the Red Giant, which is this really nice cranberry red. Then we have in the Glaminatrix palette, the Budgie Smugglers, which is also a really nice red, but I think this might end up being a bit more red, whereas the Red Giant shade is a little bit deeper. And then in the Odin's Eye palette, we have Passion. Now this one is not a true matte, it is a bit more of a satin shade, and so we will have a little bit of a shine with that one. So the formula is a little different, but the shade will be similar. So let's look at Red Giant first. And there is that guy. That is deep. That is a deep, deep shade. All right, very much a deep cranberry, maybe ever so slight of like a plummy undertone. Then the Budgie Smugglers from Glaminatrix. Yeah, definitely more of just your red on that one. Go in a little bit more. Yeah, all right, and then the last one is going to be Passion from the Odin's Eye palette. There you go. So I would say they're somewhat similar, but not 100%. The lightest shade is definitely Budgie Smugglers, then the Odin's Eye shade Passion, and then this is definitely a deep, deep red. So not quite the same, but somewhat similar to where they're headed, but the Red Giant shade is a deep. Then we have two shades that we're going to compare. The first one from the Glaminatrix palette is going to be Bloody Oath, which is a kind of grayish matte. And then we have from the Odin's Eye palette, Dazed, also a bit of a grayish matte. And so it'll be interesting to see. I think that Bloody Oath might have a bit of a greenish teal undertone to it. So here's that one. Definitely gray, but might have a bit of a teal undertone. And then Dazed. Yeah, That has a bit more of a beigey undertone to it. Yeah, so you can see this is more of a true gray with a little bit of beige. This guy, honestly, next to Dazed, doesn't even look gray. It looks more like a bluish tone. So you can definitely see the difference between those two shades. But so far, these are what we have, and some more similar than others. We're gonna get into this arm next though. All right, next up is gonna be another matte shade that I think is kind of similar with 3 different shades in the palette. So first up with Collidos, we have the Void shade, nice deeper navy. Then in the Glaminatrix palette, it's the Fair Dinkum shade, also a nice navy. And then in Odin's Eye, we have Outsider, also a navy shade. I think, however, that Outsider might be slightly lighter and not have quite so much of just a true blue. It might have a little bit of a greenish undertone. That's my initial guess. All right, so first up is Void. Very nice navy, super deep tone on there. Then we have Fair Dinkum from the Glaminatrix palette. Yeah, already can see that's a little bit lighter. And then we have Outsider from the Odin's Eye palette. Yeah, I would say these two guys look a little bit more similar to each other. Yeah, I think these two guys are very similar to each other. The Collidos shade, I think, is its own navy. It's not similar to these two, but these guys for sure look super duper similar. I would say the ever so slightly, the Odin's Eye one has a bit more teal mixed in with the blue, but they are very similar to each other for sure. Next up we have from the Collidos palette the Cylon shade, which is this kind of plummy matte shade. The closest that I could find in the palettes to that one is the Obsessed shade in Odin's Eye, but again, this one's not a true matte like the Cylon shade. This one is a bit more of a satin, and so we do have to keep that formula in mind as we swatch this. So first up will be Cylon from Collidos. Very nice plum shade. And then we have Obsessed from Odin's Eye. Definitely has a bit more of a reddish undertone to it. Yeah, you can definitely see this guy for sure is more plummy. This guy's more red. Honestly, meh. So I think Obsessed is actually fairly close to that deeper red giant shade from Collidos. So when we line them up like this, we can definitely see how those two deeper red shades are a little bit more similar. So that's actually a closer dupe to Red Giant. So just that Red Giant is matte, Obsessed is a satin shade. So that's kind of fun to find out. Okay, the next set of swatches, we're gonna run through several from each of the palettes because there are a few where I'm kind of like, I'm unsure which one this falls into. So from Collidos, we are going to swatch Rock Hopper, which is this slightly lighter purplish plum matte shade, not quite as deep as this one. So we're gonna go with that guy, and then we're gonna swatch this one after that a little bit later, which is the Naru shade, because in Odin's Eye, there is a shade that, like, honestly could kind of fit. Actually, you know what, Naru, now that I'm looking at it, could maybe go with that Odin's Eye shade that's that gray. So we're gonna swatch that next to that guy real quick, just to see what happens. Jesus, I went heavy. Let me add a little more to Days so they're evened out a bit more. Okay, yeah, so definitely gray, and then this guy is, I don't even know what you would call that shade, but it's not the light gray of Dazed. I stand corrected. We're gonna swatch it on this hand with the other ones. All right, so let's, so after Collidos, we're also going to swatch Stitch Up and She'll Be Right, those two shades from the Glaminatrix palette, and then within Odin's Eye, we're gonna swatch Mist, because I'm not quite sure of those 5 shades which ones would be super duper similar or not, because they're all in the same tonal ranges, but ever so slightly different. All right, so first up from Collidos, we're gonna go into Rock Hopper, and that is this guy. It's definitely a deeper purple, not quite as purpley as this one. Honestly, this is a bit more of a grayish blue undertone with the purple. Then we'll go into Stitch Up from the Glaminatrix palette. That's more brownish. Okay. That one could honestly go with a different Odin's Eye shade. So let's go ahead and swatch Pragmatism from Odin's Eye, which is this brown shade. See if that's maybe similar to this guy. Those are more similar. I would say that the Glaminatrix brown has a little bit of a reddish tint to it, whereas the Odin's Eye one is brown, but those two are very similar to each other for sure. Then we'll go into Mist from Odin's Eye. And there's that guy. That is a very light shade. Okay, so I don't think that that is similar to any of these guys at all. I also don't think it's similar to any of the gray shades. So that's kind of its own entity. So then we'll swatch She'll Be Right from Glaminatrix next. And there is that guy. That could be similar to Naru or Dazed. So let's go into Naru real quick. Right next to it. Okay. Not quite the same. And then we'll do Dazed. See what that looks like next to it. Also not quite the same. So there are all three of those lighter gray tones. You've got super duper light gray, almost to a white. Then you've got a little bit deeper of a gray tone, and then kind of a bit more of a lilac-y purple tone with that one. So still none of them completely the same. Okay, next up we have, honestly, again, kind of like two shades that I think might be similar, and then two additional shades where maybe. We'll see what happens. So we're gonna swatch Astro from Collidos, which is this like purple to blue duochrome. And then we're gonna swatch Charming, which is also kind of a purple to blue duochrome. Almost got a little bit of green in there as well, so it might be a multi-chrome. Then we're also gonna swatch this guy, which is kind of a purplish to blue, just because between these two, I can't quite tell which one would be closer to Astro. And then for funsies, we're gonna swatch Straya from the Glaminatrix palette, just to see if that links up maybe with Charming. We'll see what happens. So first up is going to be Astro from the Collidos palette. There we go. That's lovely. Love it. Oh man, that was definitely one of my favorites when I was first using this palette. But I mean, we know I love my blues. All right, next up is going to be Charming from the Odin's Eye palette. Ooh, okay, okay. Little bit similar, for sure. Not quite the same, but same tonal qualities on there. I think we'll do Self next from Odin's Eye, and then we'll do Straya. So here's Self. That's definitely way more purple. Okay, not the same. Then we'll go into Straya from Glaminatrix, which I think is going to be too turquoisey. Yeah, that's a little bit too light, so I would say not quite the same as the others, but I think these two, where you have the Collidos shade, Astro, and then you have Charming from Odin's Eye, those two are very similar. Still not 100% similar. I think this guy has a bit more bluish purple, whereas this guy has a bit more bluish green, but they are, of the four shades, they are the most similar. I think Straya is its whole other color, and Self is its own other color. So these two are the closest, I think, out of those categories. All right, so these are kind of all of the shades that are somewhat similar to each other. And so now we're just gonna go ahead and get into the swatches of like all of the unique shades from each of the palettes. So we'll just go all Collidos, then Odin's Eye, and then Glaminatrix, all of the individual ones. All right, so from Collidos, I would say there are 6 shades that are completely unique. So we will start off with Firefly, which is that lovely light green shifty shade, has a little bit of a pinkish quality to it as it shifts. Then we have 7 of 9, which is a matte shade. Very nice kind of teal shade. Then we have Gravity, which is that lime green matte shade. Also definitely very unique, nothing like it. Then we have Queen of Blades, which is a deeper greenish blue matte shade. I would say almost evergreen This guy's definitely a bit more of a bluish. This guy, you can see the evergreen undertones to it. Nothing else like it. Even these guys, I mean, they're close, but these are definitely more blue. This is more of a greenish undertone. Next matte shade is going to be Seamus, which is like an orangey tan shade. Then we have Nebula, and that'll be the last one. Nebula has a really nice kind of pink to orange shift to it. Very pretty. All right, so that is all of the Collidos palette. Then we can move on to the Glaminatrix palette. And for that one, there are only 2 shades that we didn't really swatch yet, and that's gonna be Whoop Whoop and Struth. Whoop Whoop is a really nice yellow metallic. That's that guy right there. I don't know why I swatched him so far over. There you go. Really pretty sunshiny yellow. And then Struth, which is that really nice mustard matte shade. So that is both of those, and they are also unique to the palette. I will say that Whoop Whoop is slightly similar to the green shade up top here, but like this guy is a true yellow, whereas this shade from Collidos is like greenish to pink. And so really just depending on how the light hits the Whoop Whoop shade, if it catches it like in the perfect light, it could look almost slightly lime green, in which case almost like this guy, but really still very different because the undertones are completely different. The Firefly shade is definitely like a duochrome, whereas Whoop Whoop is just a yellow shimmer. And so there's not really much of a shift with that one at all. All right, then we'll go on to this arm for the rest of the Odin's Eye shades. There are not a ton with Odin's Eye either. There's about 5 that I think are super duper unique. So the first one is going to be Realism, which is a brown satin shade. And I did not see really any brown satins anywhere else. And then Optimism is for sure a unique shade. This is a like silver to bluish with gold shift to it. And there's nothing like it in any of the other palettes. So you can see that really nice gold to kind of bluish silver shift on there. Then Odin's Eye does also have a really nice black shade in their palette, and that is Colorful Black. And this guy is a matte shade, but has like a little bit of those speckles in there. And then the last shade that is unique is gonna be Hallucination, which I am actually kind of curious to swatch because I wonder, yeah, I definitely think that that is unique. That's the closest shade to it would be Straya from the Glaminatrix palette, but even here you can see they're not the same. This guy is definitely more bluish. This guy is like your mermaid sea green with some purples and blues mixed in there. So that is everything swatched for all 3 palettes, and I think we have a really good mix of similar shades and then also unique shades. I would honestly say I think all 3 palettes are absolutely amazing on their own. If you get more than one of them and you combine them, you could easily create some absolutely gorgeous looks. But I think my favorite thing out of all 3 of them is just how much wider the shade range is as far as having light to deep tones, so you can really create a nice look with a lot of depth. It's more inclusive for darker skin tones. The shimmer shades are way more impactful than in other palettes that I have, and so the quality of all 3 of them is across the board amazing. I do think that some of the formulas for the shimmer shades are different amongst the different palettes. So Collidos traditionally has fairly light textures for their shimmer shades, and so they're not super duper heavy. They're very lightweight as you apply them, and you can definitely build them up to a larger opacity, but they do start off a bit more sheer. Whereas I would say with the Glaminatrix palette that the metallics are super duper pigmented and you don't really have to build them up at all. The only one I think you really need to build a little bit is the Flaming Gala shade, because that's one of those like more smooth textures rather than like a chunky, heavy metallic. And then in the Odin's Eye palette, there's a good mix of lighter metallics and then heavier metallic formulas. The pink Chameleon shade is very similar to the Glaminatrix one. It's that lighter, softer metallic where you do have to build it up a bit more. Amber Palace is the same, and that one's definitely a topper. Like, even after swiping over it several times, it was super duper sheer. So this guy is a topper shade. Some of the other ones down here in this row are heavier metallic formulas. And I do really like that some of them are also a bit deeper metallics so that you can still apply that on top of some of the other shades and create like a nice look with a lot of depth. That's like my favorite thing. I mean, clearly I love going from light to dark. So I think all three palettes are absolutely stunning, and it really just kind of depends on what your goal is. Like what kind of looks you're wanting to achieve. I couldn't pick a favorite if you asked me to. So I would actually really love to know what your guys' favorite is, if you guys have one, if you guys have picked up any of the three palettes, if you've picked up more than one, which one do you like more than the others? Because I honestly can't pick. I think they're all fantastic. So I would really love to know down in the comments what you guys think of this, and feel free to kick more requests my way for different videos. We did have another request that we do a week of Natasha Denona. So even though the April week has already been decided, I think for May we will do a week of Natasha Denona, because I do have a ton of palettes from Natasha Denona that I absolutely love. And so we will definitely get into that for May. But other than that, give me a thumbs up if you guys liked the video. And if you made it to the end of this and you have not yet subscribed, I think you should. Just clearly for all the colors, all of the swatching that we do, all of the brands that we take a look at, and just kicking any requests my way that you guys want, I will make it happen. So other than that, this is just a whole bunch of swatches of some super awesome palettes. So you guys just enjoy the rest of your Sunday and have a good one.